is John Brooker with MUSC Sustainability and Recycling, and you are at the Lowcountry Lowline event, part of the Conversation Cafe series. So a little bit about MUSC Sustainability to start. We work on a variety of initiatives across campus, including recycling and waste management, energy and water, food, transportation, climate, and green building. And if you want to hear about more events like this, you can sign up for our newsletter at our website at musc.edu/go-green. You can also see us on social media and follow us under the tag at MUSC Go Green, or if you work at MUSC, you can use Yammer as well. We're very excited today to host the Friends of the Lowcountry Lowline. Today we have Tom Bradford, Megan Mills, and Scott Parker, who are on the board. So I'm about to turn it over to them, but while the presentation is happening, you can ask questions in the Q&A panel. And then at the end of their presentation, they'll address the questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Megan of the Friends of the Lowcountry Lowline.
Okay. Perfect. And we'll actually get started with Tom Bradford.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, everybody. We are very excited about the Lowline. I started working on the Lowline back in 2012, I believe. I moved to Charleston in 2004, and that railroad line was still carrying newsprint by rail down to Post and Courier. But to my knowledge, that is the last thing that was carried by rail down those railroad lines. Much earlier in 1830, the Best Friend locomotive, which you see in two pictures here, one in the bottom is a replica, and the one on the top, I think, is the real McCoy. This is a historic railroad going back to 1830 and carrying the first passenger payloads by rail in the country. The sign on the left is a replica of the railroad, the South Carolina Canal and Railroad Company. We actually are in possession of that sign and will at some point be able to put it up on the low line. But the rails themselves were removed a couple of years ago, and we have made substantial progress on the design. But we've also found out that this railroad line bisects some other very important history in the city of Charleston. Much earlier than these locomotives were there, there were British Revolutionary War battle lines, emplacements going across this portion of the peninsula. And we have a history initiative to try and make sure that we know everything that happened around and along the low line. More on that when we actually are able to pursue the history thing. But I'll turn it over now to Scott, who with the city of Charleston has been doing some great work on what the design and what the concept will be.
Talk for about.
Hey, Scott, you were muted when you first started.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. My name is Scott Parker, and I am a board member of the Friends of the Lowline and also have a design firm called Design Works, and we were involved in creating the opportunity plan or conceptual plan for the Lowline. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes to take you through the components of the opportunity plan. We call it an opportunity plan because we're really looking for feedback from the community to look at the different opportunities that the Lowline has and to see which of those opportunities make sense, which ones feel good, which ones the community would like to have happen. So we started by defining the Lowline. And I'm only going to read a couple of slides, but this is one because it's very important. So the Lowline is public infrastructure that's enhancing the lives of all of the citizens of Charleston. The Lowline is the central spine of a regional park and mobility system connecting downtown to West Ashley, North Charleston, and Mount Pleasant. The Lowline is transforming an abandoned rail corridor and neglected highway corridor into a place supporting and expressing the 8 surrounding neighborhoods and districts. The Lowline is maximizing the storage and treatment of stormwater, helping to address citywide flooding. The Lowline is a continuous green corridor, enhancing biodiversity and providing places for active and passive recreation. And the Lowline is unique to Charleston. So you can see the Lowline is many things and has the opportunity to be many things for the city of Charleston. Next, Megan.
Nope.
So the next slide, we established some core principles to help guide our design work. And all of our principles are focused on the idea of resiliency. So in the category of social resiliency, it's about, I'm sorry about my dog, giving people a choice, an opportunity to come together, to interact. It's being inclusive to all people. Environmental resiliency is about being good for the environment, addressing climate change. Cultural resiliency is about being true to our city, expressing our history, who we are, being true to the neighborhoods through which the Lowline moves. And economic resiliency is about creating a park that can pay for itself, that can pay for its operation and maintenance. Next. And one of the principles that we talked about early is that the Lowline, while the centerpiece of it is on the peninsula, we really see it as part of a much larger system that connects West Ashley with the new bridge over the Ashley River for bikes and pedestrians. It'll connect to the Greenway and Bikeway that is there. It'll connect to North Charleston further up to the north along Meeting Street and King Street. And using the Cooper River Bridge, we can connect to Mount Pleasant. Next, please. And so here's a picture of most of the green spaces on the peninsula today, and you can see the Lowline running down the middle. What's interesting is most of our parks really serve one neighborhood, which usually are right on the edges of the park. One of the things about the Lowline is because it's almost 2 miles long, we actually touch 8 different neighborhoods. So we have an opportunity to bring folks from those 8 different neighborhoods together. Next, please. This is a map looking down, plan view of the entire peninsula. And you can see the Lowline roughly in the middle of the peninsula. So it's really in a district that's bounded to the east by Meeting Street, to the west by King Street, running from Marion Square to the south, all the way to Mount Pleasant Street to the north. It's a part of our city that has a highest density of uses, our greatest mix of uses. It has I-26 running right through the middle of it, and it's really surrounded by historic neighborhoods on either side. So it's a real interesting part of our city. And in some ways, a part of our city that's, because of the I-26 right-of-way that's there, a part of our city that's been somewhat neglected. The other thing that you'll see on this map is where we're connecting to the areas around us, connecting to Hampton Park and so forth. This is our core plan, the next one that Megan had there, our core plan that shows our master plan, our opportunity plan. We're showing not only where the Lowline would be and the streets, but you're also seeing the buildings that make up our city. So as we were thinking about the Lowline, we were really thinking about the neighborhoods and thinking about opportunities for the Lowline to lift up the neighborhoods on either side of us and enhance them. To the right is what we're calling the urban core, and that is roughly from Marion Square up to the crosstown. And we have an area called the Parks, which is really from the crosstown up to where the major intersection is heading to Mount Pleasant. And then an area called the Columns, which is basically under I-26 connecting up to Mount Pleasant Street. Next, please. So actually, I want to go back a little bit, a little more on that So that's basically the area of the plan. In the area of the urban core, which is to the right, we really imagined the low line being a series of Charleston alleys. Some of the sections of the low line have already been built. The corridor there is fairly narrow. It's surrounded on either side by fairly tall buildings or tall buildings that are about to come. So we really thought of it as a series of alleys that are connected that move through the middle of the urban core, where we have King Street, which is our best walking street to the west, and we have Meeting Street to the east. We have a lot of hotels, we have the visitor center, we have office, we have retail, we have new apartments that have been built. We have institutions like museums and so forth. So a very rich, diverse part of our city. And the low line would run right down the middle and become a connection. So in addition to the low line, we really said we probably need to upgrade the side streets as well. So the streets that connect Meeting to King, to lift up their streetscape. And in doing so, we're really imagining the low line being the catalyst to sort of transform this whole area into this amazing network of pedestrian spaces. The great thing about the low line is that there's no cars. So you can imagine a great space with outdoor dining on it that only has folks on foot or folks on bicycles. The area with the two parks, Poinsett Park is our main one, and that's where there was an old rail yard. So that's really right behind where the Daily is, right between the two overhead highways associated with the Septima Clark Parkway. So a big park space there, kind of anchoring Marion Square, a park space where major activities could occur. Further to the north, the large park space sort of looks like a triangle. We really see that as an opportunity to dramatically help the city from the standpoint of flooding and stormwater management. I'll go into that in a little more detail. And then heading to the north, at the far north where Mount Pleasant Street is where the new bus rapid transit major terminal station is going to occur. And so a real gateway to the city in that location. We have I-26, King Street, Meeting Street, and the bus rapid transit all coming together in one location. So really a gateway to the city as well as a gateway to the low line. Next, please. The next thing we're going to talk about is some of the components of the opportunity plan. And the first is dealing with water and stormwater management. Next, please. And so there's a number of different strategies. Our team was involved in the Dutch dialogues that you may have heard about that occurred in Charleston. We're really looking at not only downtown, but the entire city and how to address flooding and stormwater management. And there's a number of different strategies. And what's interesting is that a lot of those strategies can be implemented within the low line. Now, the area that you see in blue, so the low line, as Tom mentioned, originally started just as a rail corridor. In working with the city, one of the things that we realized is that that entire area under I-26 is SCDOT, South Carolina Department of Transportation right-of-way. The city of Charleston is in the process of renegotiating a lease with the Department of Transportation to get access to that land, to be able to use it for recreation and for stormwater management. So what we're doing with the low line is really not just taking advantage of the rail corridor, but we're also taking advantage of all of that right-of-way under I-26. And when you total all of that up, the space that we're looking at just here in the core is about 40 acres. So it would make it the second largest park on the peninsula of Charleston, the largest being Hampton Park, which is about 60 acres. So a lot of the strategies we learned about in the Dutch dialogues, we can implement here. Next, please. One of the big ones is all of the water that falls on the elevated highways right now simply drains through holes in the edge of the highway down onto the ground. And then that water runs into the neighborhoods on either side of I-26. So what we're looking to do is to collect all of the water that's falling on the overhead highways, bring it to one central location, which you'll see in the upper right-hand drawing there, that green triangle area, and to actually turn that area into a large new freshwater wetland. And this wetland would be used to store water. So we would collect all of the water that's currently flowing into the neighborhoods, bring it here, store it in this one location, and then let it go out through Newmarket Creek into Charleston Harbor. The other advantage of the wetlands is those wetlands will naturally clean that stormwater. It will take impurities out of the water. So not only we're restoring it, but we're also helping to clean the water. And then the third opportunity with that is we take those wetlands and we create habitat for birds and plants, and also a wonderful park space for people. So it's like a win-win-win. Not only are we taking stormwater out of the surrounding neighborhoods, we're collecting it, we're storing it, we're letting it flow out at low tides, and we're cleaning that water before it flows into Charleston Harbor. So a real opportunity for the city. The next area that I want to talk about is mobility. So I mentioned the bus rapid transit. It's called the Lowcountry Rapid Transit Line, which is currently under study. And this will run from Somerville all the way down to the peninsula with a final termination point actually at MUSC. So I know this is very meaningful for all of you at MUSC. It's also very meaningful for the city. And so as we're looking at mobility, we want to be sure that we incorporate that. The other thing that with regard to mobility is really about giving people choices so that they're not just forced to ride in automobiles, but they can also use bicycles and move on foot. Next, please. And so the plan in the upper right is showing the different options for the bus rapid transit line. We made a recommendation that was supported by the city, or we made it in unison with the city, that they focused on using Meeting Street. And I learned just this week that in fact that is their #1 alternative. You can see where the rapid transit line runs in relationship to the low line. And those red dots represent potential stops for the rapid transit. So we're looking at ways to connect to the low line and vice versa, from the low line out to the bus rapid transit. Next, please. The city of Charleston has been working diligently, as has Tom. Tom previously was with Charleston Moves for many years, was actually the founder of that, in creating the People Pedal plan for the peninsula. And the low line will have a very integral part of that. It will provide a north-south corridor, a route for people on bikes and pedestrians that's really safe. So you're not having to interact with automobiles. And then it would be connecting into the rest of the People Pedal plan, and we're working closely with the city to be sure that this happens. Next, please. We established a couple of key things. One is to say that the bikeway would be a minimum of 12 feet wide. And that would allow for bike traffic in 2 different directions. So you'd have a 6-foot travel lane in one direction and a 6-foot travel lane in the other direction. You think about folks that ride their bikes on the Cooper River Bridge and how challenging that is because of how narrow it is. The other thing that we want to do is separate the bike traffic from pedestrian traffic by a minimum of a 6-foot wide planted median. Again, using Cooper River Bridge, you can see oftentimes there's conflicts between pedestrians and bikes. And then the pedestrian path would be a minimum of 10 feet wide. So we feel that those dimensions work really well for mobility and would make the corridor function on a very high level for bikes and pedestrians. The next diagrams to the right simply say, well, where should the corridor go? When we initially started, we always thought that the bike path and pedestrian path would land right on top of the old rail right-of-way. But now that we're able to utilize more of the area associated with the DOT right-of-way, we've got options. And so one option is maybe we put the bike path up under the elevated highway where it's shaded. And if we go to the next drawing, yeah, so you can see here, so the area to the left of the drawing on the bottom, so you can see the elevated highway, you can see some homes on the far left, or just a diagram of what a home might be. And so what this says is the rail corridor is over there next to those houses. But if we move the bike path and the pedestrian path over under the elevated highway, then they're in shade. We can take the area closer to the homes and perhaps treat it more like a park with plantings. That area gets good sunlight and is really well suited to having plantings, trees, and other things that could happen there. So you could create different types of gathering spaces. And perhaps the rapid movement on a bicycle is better up under the edge of the elevated highway. Next, please. One of the key things with all of this is what we're calling mid-block crossings. So this is where the bike path and the pedestrian path crosses a street. And so what we want to do is we want to give the dominant travel to the pedestrians and the bikes. And we actually want to stop the automobiles. And so that's what's called a mid-block crossing. The diagrams that you see here, the one on the left would be in the urban core. So you're seeing perhaps a higher level material, maybe bricks that would be used. And then as we move further to the north, out of the urban core, we still would have the mid-block crossings, but maybe using different materials. And these diagrams are actually drawn by the City Design Center. So you can see it's a very detailed, integrated system that would be put in place so that the bikes and pedestrians have the dominant right-of-way. Next. So the next area is dealing with planting. So I mentioned it a little bit with regard to taking advantage of where we get really good sunlight so that we can have good plantings. Next, please. And so in the three different areas of the lowline, we're sort of looking at different opportunities for planting. So in the urban core, where the space is fairly narrow, we're sort of looking at some of the traditional Charleston alleys and perhaps using more traditional plantings. As we come into our park spaces, perhaps thinking more like Hampton Park. The photograph on the bottom right is called Bryant Park, which is in New York. The bottom left is the Waterfront Park in Mount Pleasant. Next, please. Megan, you got the next one. And then, oh, sorry. And then the next idea was in the wetland area using native plants. And then we even said, well, maybe as we move north and we've got some larger areas, we might look to bring back some of the native ecosystems that used to be on the peninsula of Charleston. Next, please. When we do the low line, one of the things that we talk about is programming. And what we mean by programming is really determining the types of activities that will occur there. And as I mentioned at the very beginning with regard to economic resiliency, one of the things that we will be looking for the low line to do is to generate revenue. And that revenue would be used to maintain the park space, maintain the bike lanes and so forth, and also revenue used for the operations of the low line. So what we're doing is we want to have a self-sustaining park, meaning that we're not going to be relying on tax dollars from the city and the city parks department to pay for the maintenance. And so we're looking at places where we can have opportunities for people to eat and drink. And if there's revenue generated from that, the revenue is then in turn used to support the park space. In the urban core, again, thinking of it as a series of alleys with perhaps restaurants and bars and so forth that would actually open out onto the lowline and have outdoor dining there. There could be shopping in some locations. There could be cultural institutions, museums, and so forth. For example, the Children's Museum is currently on the edge of the lowline. Next. As we move to the north, where we have our larger park spaces, programming would include opportunities for all ages, include opportunities for pets, opportunities for public art, opportunities for large gatherings, and also opportunities for potentially refreshments and active and passive recreation. So sports courts, currently there's a skate park that's under there that would continue to exist and thrive. And then obviously recreation associated with bicycling and moving through the park space as pedestrians. Next. And I think I'm going to talk for about 5 more minutes. So in the columns area, you know, taking advantage of the overhead spaces to provide shade. And again, perhaps there might be a market or other activities like that. Next, please. So now you're going to see a couple of images. Next, please. So this is what it looks like today. I'm sorry, go back, please, real quick. So where we are is we're looking south. We're standing on Line Street. The Guild apartments are on the left, and the Evening Post printing presses are on the right. Next, please. And then this is an image of what the low line might look like. So you're seeing in this case, this was actually an early image. And again, just as a way of generating some feedback from the community. But you're seeing pervious paving, you're seeing the opportunity for refreshments or concessions that might occur there. You're seeing nice plantings, you're seeing lighting so that it's comfortable at night. Next, please. That actually shows what it might look like at night. The next image is the large area that I mentioned that used to be a rail yard, where we're going to have our large park space called Poinsett Park. And again, we're looking south. Next, please. And an image of what that might look like. So you can see the idea of still here beginning to separate the bikes from the pedestrians so that they can function well and safely. But a large space, again, with potentially an opportunity for concessions. This would be a space that could be used for events, for gatherings, for performances, and so forth. And as you go down and under the elevated highway, there would be a connection to the left that would bring you all the way over to the Cooper River Bridge and the pathway on the top. Next. So this is the area under the large interchange where we would like to create the wetland area for storing and cleaning of stormwater. So you can see what that might look like when it was done. And again, being able to not only have this work for infrastructure to help us with stormwater, but also become an amenity that people can enjoy. Next, please. This is an area looking to the north. So you can see the elevated highway, and to the left is a group of homes called Ensign Homes. Next, please. And then you can see here, I mentioned before, the 12-foot width of the bike path, the separation of the planting area, and the 10-foot wide pedestrian path. And then the idea that we might be able to use the elevated highway as public art, and then the type of plantings and sitting areas that might occur. Next, please. And then the area that we call the columns. So this is what it looks like today. And you can actually see some of the stormwater that would have come off of the elevated highways, how it just sort of sits down there. So we would be collecting that and bringing it down. Next, please. And then an image of what it might look like were we to have a market there. And so something like this. And again, really focused on the local neighborhoods that surround us. So not doing something for visitors to our city, but really focused on people that live here. Next. And so the last sort of page here deals with how do we pay for this? How do we build it? How do we operate it? And how do we reach out to the community? And so Megan's going to, I think, talk about community engagement a little bit. Our funding strategies, we're looking, because we have some things that we believe we can get grants for, especially dealing with stormwater and transportation improvements. We think that'll be a big part of it. We also know that a lot of folks are very excited about this project. And we've received significant donations so far, and we certainly think that that will continue. Some of the folks who have major land holdings along the edges of the lowline, especially in the urban core, we're actually talking with them about paying for the improvements to the lowline in certain sections. And then the other idea, as I mentioned, was the ability to generate revenue. Phasing, we're still working on that. We think we've got a strategy where we can sort of maybe not do the whole thing at once, but at least do parts of the whole thing throughout the entire length. So it's not like we're just going to be working on one end and waiting for the rest of it to come. There will be improvements made from beginning to end early on and then added to over time. So I think at that point, I'm going to stop. I don't know, Tom or Megan, if there's anything you all want to add that I may have forgotten.
No, I think, I'll just jump in here. So moving on, this is a conceptual study. So this is just kind of ideas that we, as the Lowline, we've worked with the city of Charleston in step, also with the Dutch dialogues. And we feel like these are addressing major concerns that Charleston has. And it just shows that this public space is so important and can be kind of address some of those issues, but we do think it's very important that everyone is involved in this process. These are not the end all of what will happen. We know that our community has really great ideas. I think it's something that's important is early on, the Friends of the Lowline talked about, major words that we wanted to use when going forward with this park. And I think, commuting was a big one. Mobility was definitely high on that list. Also being a vibrant space. This is supposed to be a new and vibrant space that addresses, the water and the arts, and it can be so many things for so many different people. And then forward thinking. This is a rare opportunity in Charleston to have a blank space and be able to really come together and create something that is forward and linear parks around the country. We can become, a platform for that, really show, innovative ideas to the Charleston community. So this is a survey that we have on our website. I do recommend everyone, Scott's he actually gave a presentation to the city of Charleston's City Council, and that is on our website. Also, you can see the full presentation. So some of the slides that Scott and his team and the city of Charleston have put together, those are all on our website. But then also our survey. And this is really an interesting thing about this process right now is, Scott, Tom, and myself, we don't have a staff. We are still advocating on behalf of the Friends of the Lowline, but we are really early on in this process. And we are first to admit we do not have all the answers to this, but we will lean on partners and community leaders that can help us as well. So I think nothing is off the table, and we really want to hear from you. So I think that's just an important part of line, is that this is bringing the community together. We want this space for everyone to feel welcome, for everyone have a space to go. And there's so many different things when you're talking about biking or recreation or the green space. So we're just really excited for this opportunity. You guys can jump in if you have anything. But I guess now we'll take questions, if that's okay, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, did you have something to say?
I was just going to thank everybody again for their interest and so forth. And yeah, we're happy to stick around and answer questions.
Great. Well, thank you all for a great presentation. We have a lot of questions, and I can't guarantee that we can get to all of them, but I will start with Jennifer, who had a question about displacement in local businesses. She said that I'm glad to see something about combating the displacement of residents, and that you will support local businesses. How will you support these local businesses, and what are other ways to combat displacement? Thank you.
Well, I'll start on that, and my colleagues can pitch in. We think that the Lowline is going to be a great benefit for all the neighborhoods and for all the businesses. We sincerely hope that it stimulates a better level of business all along its length and through the neighborhoods that it touches. We hope that results in economic benefit not only for the merchants, but for residents. As Scott pointed out, the Lowline will be an active park with places for concessions of various types. This will create businesses where there was, in fact, mostly a vacuum. We're not a legislative body. We're not a government body. We certainly are in contact with our allies in City Hall, and we have always argued strongly that ways be found to protect people from displacement. But we were faced with the challenge of acquiring this property several years ago. We succeeded in getting it with the city, and I just can't imagine leaving it sit as it is now. We think it's going to be so much better across the board, economically, socially, recreationally, for everybody.
And this will bring more foot traffic to that area. So I think also, with the businesses along the Lowline, not even the concessions that can be in the park, but also working with the small businesses around it will be a very important step. So we've started reaching out. There's a lot more work to do, and just to include them about the part of the process. I will kind of address one of the other questions I saw, is also for, we also have partners along the Lowline as well, other nonprofits. So just to shout one out is Green Heart Project in the Enston homes. They are actually in the process of creating a community garden space. So where maybe, and there's possibilities it could be on the Lowline itself, but we could also have possibly an exit that goes to those Green Heart, to the Green Hearts community garden. So I think there's a lot of opportunities then to also to highlight different partners. I've seen also in Denver, one of their linear parks, has a guide of all the small businesses and restaurants and breweries and all the businesses that go along their linear park. So there's definitely opportunities to highlight those businesses.
Another question that has to do with kind of gardening in a way. Someone asked about, this was from, sorry, this thing keeps moving on me. From Jock, it says, has the master plan addressed the concept of ground cover, such as a perennial trifolium or clover species? Have any of the other master plans, including the one for Moultrie Park?
So, I'll try to answer that question. You know, at this stage of the game, I'm not sure if his question is referencing something that we do in the short term versus a long-term strategy. But I do know that when we think about the planted areas here, what we're going to do is we're going to use turf grass only when it's needed for recreational activities. So we're not going to use turf grass as part of the aesthetic. So the plant materials that will be used on the ground plane, obviously in the wetland area will be wetlands. In the other areas, he mentions clover. So we've talked about this idea of potentially having meadows and place those types of landscapes be there. But we're very, very early in the process of thinking about the planting. But if we're open to good suggestions and ideas, and it sounds like Jacques has some good information that could help us. So please make it available. Thank you.
Also, along the same lines, someone mentioned edible plantings like fruit and also considering pollinators, but I figured it might still be early for that, but that's other comments under the same category.
Right.
Early on, but I think edible gardens are kind of, you know, a future of park space and green space to have, you know, we have such a rich vegetation in our area, like the low quad, and, you know, there could be a lot, we can do a lot of fun things. And that's, again, what we're thinking is let's think outside the box of, you know, even what you see locally in Charleston, but what you see nationally and get those ideas.
The next question I have is from Keith. I'm going to combine that also with William's question, but it's about the bus rapid transit or the LCRT, Lowcountry Rapid Transit System. And Keith is asking, where are the bus lines mentioned on the previous slides? So could you talk about that? Is there a different potential option for the low line than creating parks? And I believe that Keith was specifically referring to section 4.0 sections with the elevation views that show the pedestrian path, median bicycle path, DOT column.
Right. So the diagram at the bottom here, and I should have been more descriptive, but if you're looking at the left side where it says transit hub, and you see the green line that is on the drawing, so that green line represents the route of the bus rapid transit. So it comes down, I believe, between King and or Meeting, and there's a major rapid transit hub station right there at Mount Pleasant Street. That's roughly where Santee's is. And then it runs all the way down Meeting Street. So the green line with the red dots spaced along it, that's following Meeting Street. And coming down. And when the bus rapid transit, they looked at a number of different route options, and they evaluated according to different criteria. And they also realized that because it's within the city of Charleston, they needed the city of Charleston's buy-in on the preferred route. To be honest, they looked at running it down the middle of the low line. And what happened was the only place that they could do it was on the old rail bed. And the more that we evaluated it and talked about it with them and the city and the folks doing the planning for the rapid transit line, the determination was it was better to be on Meeting Street. It offered greater opportunities for those neighborhoods along Meeting Street, opportunities for business enhancement along Meeting Street, opportunities to really support those neighborhoods that are there and to help combat displacement. And it also is close enough to the low line that folks can easily move back and forth on foot or on bike. And then it leaves the low line area open as a park space and as a space for bikes and pedestrians. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I'm going to see if there's anything more on this. So Somebody asked if Santi's will be going away with the transit hub, but that might be a question for the LCRT planners. Well down the
No.
line.
It will stay.
No, but I cannot speak for that. But that
I know I can't say that.
I am almost a weekly user of Santi, so that better not go away.
Have to preserve those tacos.
Yes.
Let me see. Yeah, so someone else was concerned about the LCRT. They're saying that, you know, a lot of past planning had involved the old rail line. I think you addressed most of that there. The next
Right.
question I have is from Keith in the Q&A section. Will electric bikes be allowed, or electric skateboards on the path that you have, the bike path?
Wow.
Yeah, I can jump in here. The Friends of the Lowline identified this this possibility and got to work and negotiated with Norfolk Southern to acquire the property. It is now the property of the city of Charleston. So all those kinds of decisions ultimately will be made by the city of Charleston. I'm a big observer of alternate forms of transportation, and around the world, obviously, electric bikes and other electric, small electric devices are coming into the picture in a big way. So ultimately, the city of Charleston is going to have to confront that decision, and I think we, as their partner, will be at the table when those things are being discussed. But I think this is still way too early to provide any kind of meaningful answer to that question.
That's understandable. The next question that I had in my queue was about security and how this has been, safety and security, how it's been considered for the low line.
Yeah, I'll address that. Going back a long time ago in the life of the West Ashley Greenway, a lot of the early objections to improving the West Ashley Greenway in West Ashley was that improving it would bring more people, which would bring more crime. Well, when you think about it, that doesn't make any sense, because more people means more sets of eyeballs, more eyes on what's going on, and if anything, a reduction in crime. If you walk with us on the low line today, you will find occasional signs of illegal activities up there, drug use, et cetera, et cetera. When this is improved, we think all those vestiges should be gone, and this will be a lovely space used by a lot of people, so many people ultimately, that doing anything bad up there is going to be very difficult.
Also, just to touch on that, is I have reached out to the City of Charleston's police department, and the local, there's neighborhood officers assigned to each neighborhood. So we are starting those dialogues just to kind of tell them where we're at and what we're proposing, and maybe things that they would like to get on board, or even programming wise, be a part of, because they will be an important partner to this project easily.
Great. The next question I have is from Christine, and she asks about the plan for waste and recycling on this route, or in your plans.
Good question. I'll take a stab at that. I mean, I think we would take the lead from organizations like MUSC.
Perfect.
And, you know, use the state-of-the-art system for addressing both of those.
Yeah, and I mean, we have done some trash pickups, but like, yeah, we're open for ideas, you know.
Yeah, we're happy to help and consult in any way there. So another question from Robert is there any type of an environmental cleanup that has to occur before things can be built?
Yes, the short answer is yes. As a rail corridor, it's quite evident that something like Roundup, if not Roundup itself, was used very often in that corridor, so that there is some ground contamination. And right now the city is spending a fair amount of money on evaluating the extent of that problem. We believe and hope, I guess, that it is not terribly significant. It may entail removal of some topsoil, but again, to Scott's point, this is an opportunity plan that we're showing. We're nowhere near a final design, and the final design could also anticipate some ways of dealing with this. For example, if we're putting stormwater mains down the middle of it, we may be removing soil for that purpose anyway. So this may all wound up, this will ultimately be resolved.
Great. Another question from James was about restroom facilities and where are they located?
Good question. All public parks need restrooms. And so you saw in some of the renderings of what it might look like. So for example, the rendering of the large park where the old rail yard is, there was a structure in there. That could certainly be a place where restrooms could occur. If we're having concessions and so forth, then we would certainly provide restrooms associated with that. So we want a park space where people can actually eat, drink, and go to the bathroom too. So we'll definitely make that happen.
Another question I have on here is about reducing the risk of having scooters and motorcycles becoming a menace in pedestrian and bike areas, and if you guys have thought of how bollards will be implemented.
So I think the scooters and motorcycle thing is more along the lines of how Tom answered the question. I think we'll use bollards certainly at the mid-block crossings. If you all remember the drawings of those, which would, where we're intersecting a public street, bollards would certainly be used to help manage and help indicate to people that they're approaching a street or vice versa. But if you're aware of a place that's done this well to manage this kind of thing with bollards, and you could send us some pictures or put us, just let us know where you've seen it. Sounds like that may be the case. We'd be happy to take a look.
Great. I have another question, and I think you might have touched on it, but if you don't mind reiterating the timing, the time frame that you have project.
Well, I'll address that. Having this opportunity study completed late last year, and by the way, we're still improving on it all the time, was a major step in what is obviously going to be a fairly long timeline. A previous meeting today was all about how we're going to figure out financing. So the truth is we haven't figured out the financing yet. We have some ideas about how that may go, but we don't have a firm plan. We're working with the city on that. That in itself will take time. This opportunity plan is not a final design plan. A final design also has to be done. Then the engineering has to be done, and the money has to be found for the construction. So I'm just sort of ticking off some of the steps that remain to be taken before any shovel goes into the ground. So it's conceivable that in certain places where developers have a stake in making rapid progress and wish to make a contribution, we may see some early progress in some limited places. But this is not going to be completed in one fell swoop, and I would be very surprised to see any shovel going into any ground anywhere on this project within 18 months.
And I'll kind of jump on that. It's just like, yeah, I mean, I think early on, this process is really just to get the community involved, get their buy-in, and then also, I mean, so because yeah, we have lots of steps that need to go into place way before we're putting a shovel in the ground. But this is how, you know, this park needs to be transparent. It needs to be thought through. So this isn't just here's what we're going to do. We're going to build it tomorrow. We need volunteers. We need support. You know, we need this to for the city of, I mean, the city of Charleston knows this is an important project for us all. So we want to keep everyone in step every step of the way so that there's a lot of feedback because this is, you know, there's a lot of steps to this. So so that's why it is very early in this process, but it's so important for people to be involved.
Megan, along that same line, I think this question would be good for you. FX Clasby, actually from my neighborhood, asked how you're reaching out to communities downtown.
Yep. So we've identified a list. I mean, currently we have identified a list of community leaders because we don't know who we don't know. So we are trying to reach out to other nonprofits, other community leaders, and try to get the word out. Again, we have no staff, not to beat that, but so as a volunteer, I'm trying to go out and to meet with as many people as we can. We will also be forming committees probably in the next quarter or two to kind of get groups of people together to talk about maybe it's the arts, maybe it's, you know, whatever you're approaching this park for, the recreation. There can be different processes, you know, different committees, but just to make sure that everybody's in the know about what's happening with this park and the stages it's going to go through. So we're trying to get the word out. And
if someone
by
would
and by platforms like this. So it's tough because of in the current climate with COVID, we're not able to set up pop-ups on the Lowline and get people outside and together in groups. So we're just hoping partners like you guys can help us spread the word.
Great. Someone asked if they wanted to volunteer, what could they do, and how could they get in touch with you?
Yes, head over to our website. Info@lowcountrylowline.org is you can email over to that. That goes to a lot of different people or a couple different people. We'll be able to get back to you on that and send you some more information about our volunteering. My email is megan@lowcountrylowline.org. Please reach out to me. I will be able to, get back to you, kind of see what you're wanting to volunteer in, what kind of capacity you'd like to do that. So we'll be able to have you help out.
Great. Well, I think we were running low on. I did add that email address into the chat panel that people can see. But I guess I'll turn it over to Tom and Scott or you all if there's any other questions that you see that remain unanswered or anything that you'd like to address before we end the meeting.
Well, I'll just my final thought is that 12 years ago or so, when a couple of us first bumped over what was still railroad tracks on Mount Pleasant Street and looked down that line and imagined a bike and pedestrian path going down there, we were obviously very excited about it. But the amount of work and thinking and planning and conversations and discussions in the community have us now probably 20 times more excited about the promise of this than when we first imagined the bike and pedestrian path. This is truly transformative in the city, and we're happy that all of you have been interested. We thank you for your attention. Scott?
Tom, you said it beautifully. I'm good. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for your time, for the presenters, and for the attendees. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.